begin by simply listening, slow down, do just how peaceful today can be. Greetings, children, it is I, your obedient servant, Sebastian St. Sarah, and Psychic Smalls, recording Smalls, Vincent Price, you can always call me Ben. Thanks so much for coming by. We're getting started with Merry Adventures with Robin Hood, and again, hope you enjoy. Wish us luck. Next you guys on hipster.
The Adventures of Robin Hood by Patricia Light. Robin Fitzooth stood outside the gates of Locksley Hall. He was looking back the way he had just come, back at the home of his boyhood that was his no more. 3 years ago his father had died, and Robin had inherited the estates of Locksley. Since he had become the Earl of Huntington, Robin had lived a wild and merry life. He could never resist a wager. More than anything, he loved to set himself against another for a trial of strength, betting high sums on who could shoot the truest, ride the fastest, or wrestle the most skillfully. Days of sport were followed by nights of feasting, and the dead father's fortune slipped through his son's fingers like air. 2 years after his father's death, Robin had found himself in desperate need of money to pay off his debts. Much of his father's wealth had been invested in trading ventures, and he knew that merchants would be returning from abroad, bringing him money. I will go to the monastery of St. Marie's and ask to speak with the abbot, he decided. When the abbot heard of Robin's plight, he willingly agreed to lend him £500 on the condition that the money should be paid back to him in full within 12 months. If this was not done, all the lands of Locksley and the Great Hall itself would belong to the abbot. Robin readily agreed to the bond, although he knew that the Locksley estates were worth far more than a mere £500, worth at least 10 times the amount of money he had borrowed from the abbot. It does not matter, he told himself. Long before April Day, I shall have money from my father's tradings. I shall pay the abbot back in plenty of time. But spring became summer, summer burnt into autumn, and autumn turned to winter. Throughout the months, plenty of money came to Robin from his father's trading ventures, but each time the money was spent on other things. There was always a faster horse to be bought, a hound that he had to possess, and wine to be laid in. Friends who needed a loan, or peasants who came to the doors of Locksley Hall were never turned away. When March ended, Robin had only managed to gather together a little over half the money which he owed to the abbot. The abbot is a holy man, he told himself. He will not hold me to such an unjust bargain. I shall explain how matters stand, and promise him full payment on the very day I receive money from my father's trading. Late on the evening before April Day, a man in travel-stained clothing, mounted on a sweating horse, rode up to the doors of Locksley Hall and demanded to see the Earl of Huntington. A groom took his horse, and a servant led him into the room where Robin was sprawled on a chair, uselessly brooding on tomorrow. "Good sir," said the man, "I bring you word from Philip of Ware. He sends sincere regrets that his trading ventures, in which your father invested some £300, have been of such long duration. But I am here to tell you that his ship has now docked at Southampton, and within 3 days you will receive your share of the monies." "How much?" gasped Robin. "3 times the amount your father invested." Robin's shouts of delight drowned the man's voice. Now he need no longer fear the abbot's demands. The bond would be repaid in full in 3 days' time. The abbot came with the first light of April Day. He did not come alone. 12 friars accompanied him, chosen not for their holiness, but for their strength. Behind the friars were 12 armed men in the livery of the Sheriff of Nottingham, a close friend of the abbot. The abbot sat in the great hall of Locksley and listened scornfully to Robin's explanations and excuses. and then commanded him to pay the bond money in full, or to leave all his lands to the abbot, as was clearly set down in the bond which he had signed. "I have told you," cried Robin. "In 3 days I will have enough money to repay the bond in full." "Our bond closes this day," said the abbot, "not in 3 days' time. Can you pay your bond this day?" "No, but then by right of the justice of our land I claim all the lands of Locksley." Seeing that the abbot truly meant to have his estates, Robin sprang up from his seat and set his hand to his sword. For a second he paused, unwilling to draw arms on a holy father of the church. In that second the sheriff's men had him by the arms and shoulders. Despite his struggles and protests, they held him tightly while the abbot formally took possession of Locksley Hall and all its lands. Then Robin was marched down the drive, thrust outside, and the gates of his home were barred against him. Robin sat down on a stone at the wayside. The sky was blue, the forest world about him shone green in the sunlight, and the singing of the birds made the trees dance with life. He stared around, and despite the hate which filled his heart against St. Marie's abbot, and the rage at his own fecklessness, he could not truly feel anything except joy at being alive and young on such a morning. "I have my bow and my health," Robin thought, "a quiver full of right good arrows, and a pair of well-soled boots upon my feet. I would be a poor spirit if I were to let such a louse as that abbot spoil such a day for me." Then Robin remembered that on April Day the sheriff was holding a shooting match in Nottingham. The prize was to be a butt of October brewed ale, and it was to go to the man who shot the truest in the whole of Nottinghamshire. "When we have drunk the barrel of ale dry, I shall have made new friends and be in a better mind to regain my father's house and lands," Robin thought as he stood up. He took one last long look at the grey towers of Locksley Hall, then swung round and strode out on the road to Nottingham. With each mile his heart grew lighter and his step more sure, for he knew that the butt of ale was his for the shooting. Young as he was, in the whole of Nottinghamshire there was no man who could shoot a straighter or a longer arrow than Robin of Locksley. He had gone some 8 miles when he came across a group of foresters sitting by the wayside, eating and drinking. They were all dressed in the livery of the king, and Robin would have passed by them without a word, but the men called out to him, asking him where he was going and why. Robin stopped and answered them squarely. "I'm on my way to Nottingham to shoot for the butt of ale." "Young cock sparrow," shouted one of the men. "When did the likes of you even have the right to draw a bow before the sheriff?" At these words, Robin felt the hot blood rise to his head, but not wanting to fight, he tried to move on past the foresters, ignoring their jeers. Then one of the men sprang up and grabbed Robin by the shoulders, taunting him. "Shoot!" he cried, his breast stamping against Robin's face. "You have not yet the strength in those chicken bones to draw back the string of that bow you carry so proudly." At the man's words, Robin's temper raged like flame, and he set an arrow to his bow. "I'll wager you 20 marks," he swore, "that by the grace of Our Lady I shall take the buck from the deer who grazed there." The men, seeing the distance of the herd, roared with laughter. "Young fool, to think that you could attempt such a shot," mocked one. "We'll take your wager," shouted another. Robin's arrow sank straight and true, and the buck sank down dead. "Now," cried Robin, his heart high at his own skill, "pay me the money I have won." The men had fallen silent, and now stared sullenly at Robin. "Get on with you," said the forester who had caught Robin by the shoulder. "We had no wager with you. You're a marked man now, as dead as the king's deer you have just killed. Were your brains as good as your aim, you should have known better than to have shot down a deer before the king's men. Think yourself lucky that we do not take you prisoner this minute." Robin turned and walked grimly away from them, hearing their mockery buzzing like a swarm of bees behind him. "Let this put feathers in your heels," yelled one of the foresters, and as he spoke, he set an arrow to his bow. The shaft skimmed past Robin's ear and landed in the mud in front of him. Robin spun round. The arrow from his bow had reached the throat of the forester almost before Robin knew what he was doing. The forester fell back, his life's blood spouting scarlet from his throat. His companions sprang to their feet, slipping bows from their shoulders, shouting with rage and astonishment. Some knelt to lift the dying man. Some took aim at Robin. who was already vanishing into the cover of the forest. All day, Robin made his way deeper and deeper into the very heart of Sherwood. At first, he followed the tracks and secret ways known to him all his life, but by evening, he was approaching the depths of the forest where he had never dared to go before. He walked between giant oaks and beeches, their trunks as huge in the failing light as the mighty pillars of the cathedral. His hands and face were scarred and torn, where in his panic he had pushed his way through the undergrowth of briar and hazel. At last he stopped, standing still in the green, strained light of the forest evening, his spirit heavy with the knowledge that he had killed a man. He knelt on the mold of the forest floor and prayed to Our Lady for forgiveness. Kneeling there, he took an oath upon himself that only in the most dire extremity would he ever again kill a fellow man. It was on Robin's third day in the forest that he met up with 3 other outlaws. 2 men, one with a grizzled beard, the other with his ears cropped in punishment for some past crime, and a boy with a fox skin over his shoulders. They had lit a fire and were cooking meat. The smell of the food drew Robin to them. When he approached, they jumped up, the grizzled man grasping a stout stave in his hand. "Ho, stranger," he cried, "make yourself known or you will feel my staff about your head." Robin spread open his hands. "I am one of you, brother," he said, knowing that his words were true. He was brother now to all the forest outlaws. Doubly outlawed, once for killing the king's deer and once for the murder of the forester. If he were ever to be caught, his throat would wear the hangman's necklace and his feet would dance on air. Robin was about to add his name when the earless man interrupted him. "I think I know the cast of your face," he said. "When they cut my ears, they were not too particular about the knife. My wounds would not heal and the suppuration into my head. My wife, being told of a certain great house where she could obtain salves, went there and was given ointment that healed my head and a gold piece which saved my children from starving." At the man's words, Robin felt a sweetness stir in him. Since he had killed the forester, all had been black as midnight. It had seemed to him that all his life was cursed until the man brought back to him the memory of the poor who had come to Locksley for alms and had never been turned away. The memory seemed to Robin to be a gift from Our Lady, and he swore in his heart always to be true to his vow. "If I am right," warned the earless man, "and I'm sure I know, do not give it your name. Cutthroats and thieves live in this forest. If there is a price on your head, many of them will be pleased to lay hands on the reward. Forget your old name, take a new one. Become a new man of Sherwood." Robin of Locksley bowed his head to the man, knowing that he had been given good advice. "My name," he said, "is Robin of the Wood." "Nay," answered the grizzled man, "we are all of the wood. Let your name be Robin Hood. The hood you wear is rich enough to crown a king." "Then Robin Hood I am," agreed Robin, shaking him by the hand. They sat together and shared the stew, and when they had eaten, the grizzled man asked, "Will you join me? Your arrows could find the heart of many a fat friar, and our fingers could pick gold from his saddlebags when he had no more need of it. We could grow rich together." Robin raised himself up on one elbow. "I have come into Sherwood," he said, "with an oath to Our Lady on my heart to take no man's life, to rob only the rich so that their wealth may be given to the poor, and to gather round me men who think the same as myself, so that in some way we may begin to put right the wrongs that inflict our land." "That's moonshine talk," said the grizzled man. "Line your own purse first." "Take gold where you can find it," agreed the other man. "The weaker the traveller, the less danger we will be in." Robin rose to his feet. "Then I must go on my way," he said. "For your companionship, my thanks." He walked away from them into the forest. He found a low, spreading oak, climbed into its branches, and eventually fell asleep. When Robin woke in the morning, the boy with the fox's skin was curled at the root of the tree. "I am your boy now," he replied when Robin questioned him. "What you said last night, that's what I feel. I do not want gold for myself. That is all those two ever think about. They do not care who they rob or kill. But I am for what you said. Rob the rich to feed the poor. Let me stay with you. By my oath, so you shall, cried Robin, grasping the boy's shoulders. I shall call you Todd for the skin you wear. We shall be the first. They'll come to join us, others who share our longing for justice. By our Lady Todd, we will have a merry life in Sherwood. So Robin Hood began his life in Sherwood. Soon no one remembered his old name or where he had come from. But many heard of his new name and came into the forest to find him and join his band. Some were men with a price on their heads for breaking the unjust laws of the forest, or for misdeeds against the sheriff who, from Nottingham, governed the neighbouring area for the king. He was a man of power, having his own small army and caring little for any justice, being ruled only by his own greed. Some who came were peasants who could no longer endure their days of endless toil, the results of their labours being taken by the church in tithes, or by representatives of the king in taxes. There were true men sick at heart to see the England they loved in the hands of Norman barons, and had to watch impotently while the church grew to shake them by the hand, clasp them by the shoulder, and welcome them to Sherwood. Each man was given a suit of Lincoln green, and each made for himself a bow of yew, and arrows that flew straight and sure. There was not one of the outlaws who did not worship Robin. They were awed by his skill with the bow and his wisdom of forest ways. They loved his light step, his ready laughter, and his bold heart that was always looking for new adventures. When they heard the sound of Robin's horn ringing through the forest, outlaws. Before they could join, they all had to swear the great oath, to rob the rich and give to the poor, to withstand. Some were men with a price on their heads for breaking the unjust laws of the forest, or for misdeeds against the sheriff who, from Nottingham, governed the neighbouring area for the king. He was a man of power, having his own small army and caring little for any justice, being ruled only by his own greed. Some who came were peasants who could no longer endure their days of endless toil, the results of their labours being taken by the church in tithes, or by representatives of the king in taxes. There were true men sick at heart to see the England they loved in the hands of Norman barons, and had to watch impotently while the church grew as greedy and as cruel as the nobles. These and many more sought out Robin Hood in order to join his band of outlaws. Before they could join, they all had to swear the great oath, to rob the rich and give to the poor, to withstand tyranny and to harm neither woman or child. When they had sworn, Robin would shake them by the hand, clasp them by the shoulder, and welcome them to Sherwood. Each man was given a suit of Lincoln green, and each made for himself a bow of yew, and arrows that flew straight and sure. There was not one of the outlaws who did not worship Robin. They were awed by his skill with a bow and his wisdom of forest ways. They loved his light step, his ready laughter, and his bold heart that was always looking for new adventures. When they heard the sound of Robin's horn ringing through the forest, every man raced at full speed to answer the call, and there was not one of them who would not have given up his life to save his leader. It was spring again. Robin Hood had lived in Sherwood for 2 years, and had gathered about him close on 100 men. Yet on this May morning, he felt the need to go wandering on his own. "Stay here," he said to the outlaws who were with him. "It is too long since an adventure came my way, and if it will not come to me, then I must go and seek it out."